Greetings, adventurers. You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. Don't worry, it's a safe space. I'll handle all the danger for you. I designed these stories to help you relax, chill anxiety, and go to sleep. Maybe they'll even put a smile on your face, even if it's a sleepy smile. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Good evening, adventurers. I hope you're doing well. First of all, I want to wish you a Happy New Year, something I like to say throughout all of January, as I think it still applies through the whole month, and it also follows proper holiday greeting etiquette. I wish you goodwill and good cheer, and hope the coming year brings you peace and prosperity, along with joy and comfort. Now, I hope you're all cozy and settled in, because tonight we're still going to be doing something a little different, and we'll be finishing the holiday story about how I met Bradley, my lab assistant, and how I solved the mystery of the Christmastown Toy Store. I will continue with the story of how I faced Professor P and his nefarious science challenges next time. Now, as you remember from last month's flashback story of Part 1, I was called to Christmastown, Bradley's hometown, by Mayor Crinkle, not Kringle, to solve the mystery of strange goings-on at the Christmastown Toy Store, which during the holiday season was hampering sales and lowering spirits. It was quite serious business indeed. I had made my way from Los Angeles to Longyearbyen, Norway, and then took a snowmobile to Christmastown. There I was greeted warmly by Mayor Crinkle. There was trouble in town, sure, but that never stopped anyone from warmly welcoming visitors to Christmastown. I took a few moments just to take in the festive, joyful town. As I said before, it's like walking into a Norman Rockwell painting, and it's incredibly festive with Christmas lights, holiday spirit, and the annual Christmastown Cookie Festival. And while they start right after Halloween, Christmastown celebrates Christmas all the way through January. Plus, they have their annual Christmas in the Summer parades and other holiday celebrations throughout the year, more than earning their town's name. Mayor Crinkle brought me to the Christmastown Toy Store, where a young Bradley was waiting outside taking notes. It was the first time we met. After introductions and some sharing of some theories, we entered the troubled toy store. The strange goings-on were immediately apparent, from a sudden heat wave to rumbling and shaking to a growling from an animal that I could not identify. And I will tell you all about what we discovered next in a moment. But before I finish this two-part holiday tale, I want to talk to you about a few things. It's a new year, and as I mentioned before, we just wanted to thank you for all your support and for being here listening to our stories. It's much appreciated, and we are also warmed by all the positive comments the show has received over the years. We love doing the show, and we are very pleased so many of you are receiving such comfort and joy from it. Onward and upward this year, and we may even have a few new surprises in store. Also, remember, there are two types of shows in the podcast high-speed show feed. There are the regular episodes, such as what you're listening to right now, and Professor Atwood's Sleepscapes to give you more adventures per month. These sleepscapes are pulled directly from my adventures with all the music and sounds we collect on our journeys. We then remix and remaster them and make them longer so you can create your own adventure in your mind as you settle in and drift off to sleep. And as always, don't forget to rate and review the show and maybe post about the show, as that's how other adventurers find us. And since it's a new year, why not order some Professor Atwood merchandise or make a Happy New Year donation to the show? or even join the monthly White Cat Entertainment Patreon. Just go to whitecatentertainment.com. It is much appreciated. All right, let's get back to the story. We're getting back to the back half of a flashback, if you will. Sometimes you just have to go with alliteration. It's good in small doses. Anyway, I was there in the Christmastown Toy Store with a young Bradley and with Mayor Crinkle, trying to make sense of the odd phenomena facing us. Things had quieted down and there were no growls, heat, or rumbling. Bradley had theorized it was a geological event, but that didn't explain the growling. I told him that some mysteries have multiple parts, and that he wasn't necessarily wrong, but it was more likely that his theory was one piece of a larger puzzle. He nodded, and we both wondered about what exactly those other pieces could be. We walked further into the massive and remarkable toy store, passing everything from Legos to wooden chess sets to video game consoles. They even had retro consoles like a vintage Atari 2600 and an Intellivision gift set that, I'll be honest, I was tempted to take a look at. We walked further into the store, and I was soon taken aback by an incredible toy display featuring the history of toys. This toy store was just full of surprises. I mean, apart from the bizarre, mysterious happenings chasing away all the shoppers, I was really enjoying and quite impressed with this toy store north of the rest of the world. There was even a historical Egyptian display, complete with toys and toy mummies. You see, the history of toys is quite interesting. Toys and games have been retrieved from the sites of ancient civilizations and have been mentioned in ancient literature. The earliest toys were made from natural materials such as rocks, sticks, and clay. Thousands of years ago, Egyptian children played with dolls that had wigs and movable limbs, which were made from stone, pottery, and wood. However, evidence of toys in ancient Egypt is exceptionally difficult to identify with certainty in the archaeological record. Small figurines and models found in tombs are usually interpreted as ritual objects. Those from settlement sites are more easily labeled as toys. These include spinning tops, balls of string, and wooden models of animals with movable parts. But honestly, I think we could still call them toys. Small figurines and models, even in pyramids, somebody played with them, be it an adult or a child. In ancient Greece and ancient Rome, children played with dolls made of wax or terracotta, sticks, bows and arrows, and yo-yos. When Greek children, especially girls, came of age, it was customary for them to sacrifice the toys of their childhood to the gods. The oldest known mechanical puzzle also comes from ancient Greece and appeared in the 3rd century BCE. The game consisted of a square divided into 14 parts, and the aim was to create different shapes from the pieces. In Iran, puzzle locks were made as early as the 17th century. Blowing bubbles from leftover soap became a popular pastime, as shown in the painting The Soap Bubble in 1739. Other popular toys included hoops, toy wagons, kites, spinning wheels, and puppets. Many board games were produced by John Jeffries in the 1750s, including A Journey Through Europe. The game was very similar to modern board games. Players moved along a track with the throw of a die and landing on different spaces that would either help or hinder the player. In the 19th century, Western values prioritized toys with an educational purpose, such as puzzles, books, cards, and board games. Religion-themed toys were also popular, including a model Noah's Ark with miniature animals and objects from other Bible scenes. More complex mechanical and optical-based toys were also invented during the 19th century. Carpenter and Wesley began to mass-produce the kaleidoscope, invented by Sir David Brewster in 1817, and had sold over 200,000 items within 3 months in London and Paris. The company was also able to mass-produce magic lanterns for use in phantasmagoria shows by developing a method of mass production using a copper plate printing process. Popular imagery on the lanterns included royalty, flora and fauna, and geographical man-made structures from around the world. The modern zoetrope was invented in 1833 by British mathematician William George Horner and was popularized in the 1860s. Wood and porcelain dolls and miniature dollhouses were popular with middle-class girls, while boys played with marbles and toy trains. Some of these were in the magnificent History of Toys display, and I wanted to get a closer look at the toy trains, but it was time to keep moving. We moved further into the toy store, and the strange occurrences, well, occurred again. Only this time the odd growling was a little louder, and the heat was a little higher. It seemed like we were headed in the correct direction. We then passed another amazing display celebrating the golden age of toy development. You see, the golden age of toy development occurred during the industrial era. Real wages were rising steadily in the Western world, allowing even working-class families to afford toys for their children, and industrial techniques of precision engineering and mass production were able to provide the supply to meet this rising demand. Intellectual emphasis was also increasingly being placed on the importance of a wholesome and happy childhood for the future development of children. Franz Kolb, a German pharmacist, invented plasticine in 1880, and in 1900 commercial production of the material as a children's toy began. Frank Hornby was a visionary in toy development and manufacturing and was responsible for the invention and production of 3 of the most popular lines of toys based on engineering principles in the 20th century: Meccano, Hornby Model Railways, and Dinky Toys. Meccano was a model construction system that consisted of reusable metal strips, plates, angle girders, wheels, axles and gears, with nuts and bolts to connect the pieces and enabling the building of working models and mechanical devices. Dinky Toys pioneered the manufacture of die-cast toys with the production of toy cars, trains and ships, and model train sets, which became popular in the 1920s. The British company revolutionized the production of toy soldiers with the invention of the process of hollow casting in lead in 1893. Yeah, the whole thing about lead wasn't really known at the time, but anyway, the company's products remained the industry standard for many years. Puzzles became popular as well. In 1893, the English lawyer Angelo John Lewis, writing under the pseudonym of Professor Hoffman, interesting, wrote a book called Puzzles Old and New. It contained, among other things, more than 40 descriptions of puzzles with secret opening mechanisms. The book grew into a reference work for puzzle games and was very popular at a time. It might have been the very first game guide. We don't really know for sure. In 1903, a year after publishing The Tale of Peter Rabbit, English author Beatrix Potter created the first Peter Rabbit soft toy and registered him at the Patent Office in London, making Peter the oldest licensed character. It was followed by other spin-off merchandise over the years, including painting books and board games. The Smithsonian magazine stated, Potter was also an entrepreneur and a pioneer in licensing and merchandising literary characters. Potter built a retail empire out of her bunny book that is worth $500 million today. In the process, she created a system that continues to benefit all licensed characters from Mickey Mouse to Harry Potter. I mean, that was pretty impressive, especially for, 1903. And it's a lesson clearly George Lucas learned when retaining merchandising rights for Star Wars. Anyway, we slowly moved towards the back of the toy store, not really sure about what we would find, but it continued to get warmer and then, unexpectedly, wetter. There was a small pool of water on the floor, and all the stuffed animals, unfortunately, seemed to have a thin layer of water droplets hanging from all of their hypoallergenic fur. Mayor Crinkle looked up, trying to spot a leak. But I stole a glance over at Bradley, and he was, correctly, looking in the other direction, down. It was clear that these issues were coming from below, not above. We moved further into the toy store, and then almost fell into a giant hole. As I suspected, one of the hot springs under Christmastown had formed a geyser and had destroyed the floor of the toy store. That explained the rumblings and things moving off the shelves and the heat. But not the sounds. But as I told Bradley, one mini mystery at a time, until the answers formed to complete the whole thing. Now, you see, a hot spring, hydrothermal spring or geothermal spring, is a spring produced by the emergence of geothermally heated groundwater onto the surface of the Earth. The groundwater is heated either by shallow bodies of magma, molten rock, or by circulation through faults to hot rock deep in the Earth's crust. Hot spring water often contains large amounts of dissolved minerals. The chemistry of hot springs ranges from acid sulfate springs with a pH as low as 0.8 to alkaline chloride springs saturated with silica to bicarbonate springs saturated with carbon dioxide and carbonate minerals. Some springs also contain abundant dissolved iron. The minerals brought to the surface in hot springs often feed communities of extremophiles, microorganisms adapted to extreme conditions, and it is possible that life on Earth has its origin in hot springs. Again, something also up for debate with scientists. Humans have made use of hot springs for bathing, relaxation, or medical therapy for thousands of years. Now, more on that in a moment. Now, water issuing from a hot spring is heated geothermally, that is, with heat produced from the Earth's mantle. Now, this takes place in one of two ways. In areas of high volcanic activity, magma or molten rock may be present at shallow depths in the Earth's crust. Groundwater is heated by these shallow magma bodies and rises to the surface to emerge at a hot spring. However, even in areas that do not experience volcanic activity, the temperature of rocks within the Earth increases with depth. The rate of temperature increase with depth is known as the geothermal gradient. If water percolates deeply enough into the crust, it will be heated as it comes into contact with hot rock. This generally takes place along faults where shallow rock beds provide easy paths for water to circulate to greater depths. Much of the heat is created by decay of naturally radioactive elements. An estimated 45 to 90% of the heat escaping from the Earth originates from radioactive decay of elements mainly located in the mantle. The major heat-producing isotopes in the Earth are potassium-40, uranium-238, uranium-235, and thorium-232. In areas with no volcanic activity, this heat flows through the crust by a slow process of thermal conduction. But in volcanic areas, the heat is carried to the surface more rapidly by bodies of magma, of course. A hot spring that periodically jets water and steam is called a geyser. I mean, this is what we were looking at here in the hole in the floor of the Christmastown Toy Store. Anyway, I mean, if you're in active volcanic zones such as Yellowstone National Park, magma may be present at shallow depths. If a hot spring is connected to a large natural cistern close to such a magma body, the magma may superheat the water in the cistern, raising its temperature above the normal boiling point. The water will not immediately boil, though, however, because the weight of the water column above the cistern pressurizes the cistern and suppresses boiling. However, as the superheated water expands, some of the water will emerge at the surface, reducing pressure in the cistern. This allows some of the water in the cistern to flash into steam, which forces more water out of the hot spring. This leads to a runaway condition in which a sizable amount of water and steam are forcibly ejected from the hot spring as the cistern is emptied. The cistern then refills with cooler water, and the cycle repeats. Geysers require both a natural cistern and an abundant source of cooler water to refill the cistern after each eruption of the geyser. If the water supply is less abundant, so that the water is boiled as fast as it can accumulate and only reaches the surface in the form of steam, the result is a fumarole. If the water is mixed with mud and clay, the result is a mud pot. Now, here we were clearly dealing with a non-volcanic geyser and definitely not a mud pot. Now, hot springs also often host communities of microorganisms adapted to life in hot, mineral-laden water. These include thermophiles, which are a type of extremophile that thrive at high temperatures between 113 and 176 degrees Fahrenheit. Further from the vent, where the water has had time to cool and precipitate part of its mineral load, conditions favor organisms adapted to less extreme conditions. This produces a succession of microbial communities as one moves away from the vent, which in some respects resembles the successive stages of the evolution of early life. Now, for example, in a bicarbonate hot spring, the community of organisms immediately around the vent is dominated by filamentous thermophilic bacteria, such as maybe aquifex and other aquifacales, that oxidize sulfide and hydrogen to obtain energy for their life processes. Hot springs have been enjoyed by humans for thousands of years. Even macaques are known to have extended their normal range into Japan by making use of hot springs to protect themselves from cold stress. Hot spring baths, or onsen, have been used in Japan for at least 2,000 years, traditionally for cleanliness and relaxation, but increasingly for their therapeutic value. In the Homeric Age of Greece, about 1000 BCE, baths were primarily for hygiene. But by the time of Hippocrates in 460 BCE, hot springs were credited with healing power. The popularity of hot springs has fluctuated over the centuries since, but they are now popular around the world. Well, in any case, looking at the hole in the toy store, it was time to go, well, down. Now, of course, I had rope. I was prepared, after all. But Mayor Crinkle found a large ladder used to hang decorations in the high corners of the store, and that seemed to do the trick, and I'll be honest, was just easier. I mean, it wasn't very deep. We descended into an underground cavern. It was filled with hot spring pools, and also, well, snowmen. They were the ones doing the unusual and confused growling. Now, when I say snowmen, I don't mean snowmen made out of snow that children would make. These are an actual species. They're just called snowmen. See, they lived near Christmastown in tribes and were largely harmless. They're kind of like Yeti, but more relaxed. I could see why they wanted to use the hot springs, but something was very wrong. Now, this was the first time I had encountered the snowmen, so I was a little startled, but Bradley and Mayor Crinkle were aware of them, but didn't see them that often, and were a little surprised to see them in hot springs under the Christmastown Toy Store. But I was thinking, and it's possible there may have been some overlap with humans and snowmen in their hot spring beliefs. For humans, and possibly now snowmen, because of both the folklore and the claimed medical value attributed to some hot springs, they were often tourist destinations and locations for rehabilitation clinics for those with disabilities. However, the scientific basis for the therapeutic bathing in hot springs is inconclusive. But be that as it may, even if it's a placebo effect, there's no arguing that it's made plenty of people, and possibly snowmen, feel better and more relaxed. And so I fall more on the side of if it makes you feel better, then it's a positive outcome, regardless of the methodology. And this is also where we seem to be observing the unexpected and unusual side effect the hot springs were having on the snowmen. They were obviously built for the cold, but they perhaps wanted to take in a little bit of heat and comfort, just like humans, and discovered the underground hot springs cavern. But something was going wrong. They were in confusion and distress. So it looks like, as I said to Bradley, the hot spring geysers destroying the floor of the Christmastown Toy Store was only one piece of the puzzle. We had found the next, possibly larger one. Now, I used the UPL to try and communicate with the snowmen. I explained to Bradley that it was the universal pantomime language that most living things on the planet knew, except marine life, well, with the exception of sea monsters, but anyway, I'm getting off track. The snowmen clearly knew the UPL, but were not used to using it, as no one living in Christmastown had ever tried, and it turns out no one there knew it, but Bradley instantly wanted to learn. So it took a few minutes for all of us to get up to speed. Now, I asked for a volunteer among the snowmen and began setting up my portable suitcase science lab. Obviously, it didn't have everything I needed, but I would have to make do. I took some fur samples and Bradley assisted me. He was a bit nervous. He knew about the snowmen, but had never seen them this close before. I also managed to get a saliva sample. Well, I mean, that part was pretty easy. It seemed to be everywhere with all the distressed and confused growling. Anyway, I started looking at everything under my portable microscope, and while I began forming some theories, the results were inconclusive. It was then that I noticed some new behavior from some of the snowmen, behavior that we wouldn't have been able to hear or observe from above in the toy store. A couple of them sneezed, and a couple others started coughing and blowing their noses. I would need a blood sample to be sure, and I wasn't sure how easy that would be to get. I used the UPL, but I'm not sure how much was coming across. Finally, an older snowman seemed to understand and offered his paw. I took a quick blood sample and went back to my microscope and my slides. What I found confirmed my suspicions, even though it was, unlikely. But there it was, staring me in the face on the slide and in the other samples. The snowmen had colds, something that they had never experienced before, and something that was causing stress and causing them to vocalize their discontent through confused growling. Now, as I said before, hot springs can have their own ecosystems, even as unlikely as it seems, in extreme heat and surrounded by extreme cold. Because they didn't have human immunities, the filamentous thermophilic bacteria in the hot springs were making them sick. I asked Mayor Crinkle if they had any antibiotics in the Christmastown pharmacy, and he said of course, but the Christmastown pharmacy was stocked more with antacids this time of year due to the annual cookie festival, but he was sure he could scrounge something up. I said excellent, and told him to get some and bring them back as soon as possible. I turned to Bradley and said our next challenge would be to explain what was going on to the snowmen and tell them that, unfortunately, they shouldn't really use the hot springs in the underground cavern anymore. And we had to get them to take the antibiotics as well. The older snowman from before seemed like he was listening, even without using the UPL. He then used the UPL to convey that he had been around for a while and had picked up a few things, including rudimentary English. He understood what we were saying and would communicate it to the rest of his tribe. He said he was the equivalent of the high snowman shaman, and they would listen to him. He also added that while it seemed like the snowmen enjoyed the hot springs, the truth was they were a novelty, and they actually preferred the cold more anyway. Then the older snowman said he wouldn't turn down a mug of hot apple cider, which I completely understood. As promised, Mayor Crinkle returned quickly with antibiotics and more hot apple cider, which was appreciated by Bradley and I, and also a couple of the snowmen. We distributed the antibiotics and explained how to take them, but then found it was, just easier to crush them up and put them in the hot apple cider, which then all of them drank enthusiastically. The snowmen then thanked us and left the underground hot springs cavern, never to return. Mayor Crinkle said they may make it part of the toy store and add a bath toy section in the hot springs cavern. I thought that was a wonderful idea. We soon climbed out via the ladder and made our way back to the center of town. The mayor announced the crisis was solved and the toy store would open again in a week or so after a thorough cleaning and some floor repair. There was cheering, and then I noticed the cookie festival had already started. I was indeed in time for the Christmastown Cookie Festival, and the whole town and mayor offered me free accommodations through the new year, so how could I say no? I stayed through New Year's Day, enjoying the hospitality of Christmastown. But all too soon, it was time to return home. As I was packing up, there was a knock at my hotel room door. It was Bradley, and he had his suitcases with him. He asked me when we were leaving for my home lab. I said, "Now wait a minute, Bradley. I didn't ask you to be my lab assistant just yet." He smiled and said, "I know, but you were going to." I looked at him for a moment. He was absolutely right, of course, and I appreciated his initiative. I asked if it was okay with his family and if he was ready to leave Christmastown. He said yes, and added that he could only imagine where we would end up going next. I smiled, shook his hand, and welcomed him aboard. He asked if he could drive the snowmobile back to Longyearbyen, and how could I say no? I mean, I wasn't planning on taking it anyway. I'd made arrangements for the helicopter to bring us back, but I would just have him leave early. And that would be his first challenge. I told him I was leaving on the helicopter, and he would have to figure out when to leave on the snowmobile so he would get to Longyearbyen at the exact same time. I said add in the variables of polar bears and possible shenanigans from true emperor penguins. He smiled, grabbed his suitcases, and then rushed off, knowing he only had about 23 minutes to get going. I smiled and knew I had made the right choice. I had found a bright young man with a great attitude and an incredible future ahead of him. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but I'd also found the lab assistant that was so dedicated he would travel back in time to rescue me in the Paleozoic era. I knew we would have many adventures together, and I knew there were many more that I hadn't even dreamed of yet. And before I end this evening's story, that's what I want to talk to you about. First of all, I want to wish you Happy New Year again because it all ties together. Well, sort of. Anyway, a new year is about new beginnings, and it's a time for new everything. New paths, new opportunities, and new ways of thinking. And sometimes when you do something new, or you meet someone new, you just know it's a good fit, and it feels right from top to bottom. I wish I could tell you there was a scientific reason for this, but the truth is, there isn't. I just knew Bradley was the right lab assistant for me, and he knew I was the right scientist adventurer for him. But you'll never know unless you're open to something new. So this new year, go out there, meet new people, seek new opportunities, and see new far-off lands. You'll be the richer for it, and who knows what adventures may be awaiting you. Go. Find your new beginnings in this new year. Godspeed, adventurers.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, and blankets, go to whitecatentertainment.com.